Following on this episode of Law Weekly, a conversation about the recently leaked memo on the proposed mass burial for some EndSARS victims and other issues, we have the views of a senior advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa. Also showing on the program, highlights from the meeting between the governor of Cross River State, Governor Basiotu, and judges in the state, plus a recap of some of the top trending legal stories in the news. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Shola Shuyeli. The recently leaked memo on the proposed mass burial for some EndSARS victims has once again brought to the fore some unresolved controversies generated by that nationwide protest. My guest, Mr. Adegboruwa, was a member of the Lagos State Judicial Panel on restitution for victims of SARS. I began by asking his thoughts about the memo and the controversy it has generated.
I think that the leaked memo from the Ministry of Health of Lagos State is just one of many surprises that people will still see in the course of time. As so long as the government has not come to terms with the reality of the events of October 20th, 2020. I do not think there's anybody in Nigeria who will say he's not aware that there were fatalities indeed on the 20th. Maybe the challenge will be the quantum or the number of such fatality. But to blanketly assert that there was no death or that there was no blood spilled in any way at all, as a result in particular of gunshot by members of the Nigerian Army, is to do a disservice, to the souls of those people who are affected. And I don't think in Nigeria today, except for political reasons, anybody within his conscience will say that blood was not spilled or that people did not die as a result of a gunshot wounds fired by the Nigerian Army. I think what's important for me is that truth cannot be hidden. And what the government ought to do, I think, is to take the totality of the material submitted by the panel and engage the youth and find a lasting reconciliation that will put the matter to rest once and for all. If there are people who are fingered to be culpable, necessary actions be taken, And then I think that reconciliation should be the primary focus of government, because we're talking about the lives of your citizens. So government needs to come out clean and embrace the young people. It will keep reverberating in the life of Nigeria. It happened in the presidential election. EndSARS matter played a vital role in the result of the presidential election, in particular in Lagos State. And it will continue like that, until there is a genuine embrace of the young people by the government, because that was the purpose of setting up the panel, and that should be fulfilled.
So would you say that the government has not shown enough commitment to the implementation of the recommendations and findings of the panel?
Commitment has been shown, in fairness, because in setting up the panel, we extracted commitment from His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State in particular, that there will be results. Especially, because there are two angles to the panel. The first is about police brutality, abuse of human rights. And he made funds available to the extent that once findings were made showing that, a particular petition has succeeded, the family of the deceased were compensated. So in that regard, one could not say that the commitment has not been shown at all. But in the first leg of the panel's activity, we looked at areas that has been leading to constant friction between police, law enforcement agencies, and in this civil society. And we identified those issues to be poor welfare, because one of the demands of the young people was also to elevate the circumstance of training and welfare of police officers. And then, of course, the handling of weapons. There was not enough training. A girlfriend and a boyfriend are disputing and then gunshots. So we saw that there was that challenge, and they were part of our recommendations for there to be proper training for police officers in handling of weapons. And then the psychology of most policemen is that of occupation. People use uniform and the leader weapon as a means of coercing people. So we thought that there was need for training on human rights, for the police to understand that people have basic rights, and these things were lacking. So I think that because those issues were not addressed, you've seen that even after the EndSARS panel and even the report, cases of extrajudicial killing is been recurring. The one that happened in Nigeria to the lawyer is the same circumstance, and it's still happening and will continue to happen. So I think government has to visit that report and holistically look at the recommendations affecting the relationship between the law enforcement agencies and the civil populace.
The leaked memo had the headline, "Mass Burial for 103 EndSARS Victims." The government has come out to say that these bodies were not from the Lekki toll gate. It's become a major talking point. Give us some clarifications about that.
You know, there was light out. The confusion was that the government gave a directive for a curfew to be implemented by a particular time, based on appeals from various quarters about people accessing their homes, people closing from work. That was extended. And the army people who came to testify before the panel were not aware that the curfew had been extended beyond the period that they were earlier informed. So they went there to enforce the curfew. And at the period of that enforcement, the billboard that illuminates the area was put out. So it became a difficult thing to really calculate the number of people affected. So the challenge we had in the panel was that you could not say that indeed from the testimony of the witnesses, whether they were 100, whether they were 50, we only limited ourselves to the ones that could be identified by name based on the testimony of the witnesses. So you can't really say, you know, because the government that had the bodies, you know, according to the allegation of the youth, used their truck to pack away the bodies of the victims. So it's only the government who is in a position to be able to tell us how many people are involved in that incident.
Away from Lekki toll gate, let's talk about the recent scuffle that we saw between the operatives of the DSS and those of the correctional center. Most people have described this as a show of shame and an insult to the administration of justice in Nigeria. How do you read it? You know, that whole scenario and the response of the NBA to the situation. Would you say that it's adequate?
Well, I think that we must first of all understand that we're on a democratic system of government that is anchored upon the rule of law and due process. The Department of State is an establishment of a particular law. So being an agency of law, it's under a duty to follow the law in its operations. And that department is part of the executive arm of government, being under the presidency. So the Constitution states clearly the period under which you could arrest or detain people. No matter the allegations against any citizen, you must bring them before the court, because you can't try them by yourself as DSS. You must take them to the court. You are the one alleging, you are the one investigating, you can't prosecute. And that's why people put pressure on the DSS based on the order of the Federal High Court that Mr. Godwin Emefiele should be charged to court. The moment the DSS entered the premises of the Federal High Court, following a charge preferred by the DSS itself, his hand became tied in respect of the fate of the suspect or the defendant. It is the judge who will determine where the accused person will be detained, if he's to be freed, and the conditions for the freedom. In this particular case, the judge gave an order that he be remanded in the correctional service pending the perfection of his bail. The DSS lost the power within the premises of the court to continue to hold the defendant, because that would then be a direct violation of the order of the court. The man must first enjoy his freedom. You could follow him home. You can follow him to anywhere he's going, but he must first enjoy the order that's been given by the court. So what that has played out is this. You know, when government is involved in acts that seem to resemble lawlessness, it sends wrong signal to the citizens. Because what the people will be saying is that, what's the essence of following the law? What is the essence of abiding by due process if the people who should enforce the law themselves are seeming to be the lawbreakers? So it's not good for any government, and in particular a government that probably is less than 1 year old. This shouldn't be the way that you send a signal to the people of Nigeria as a style of leadership. And I think that for me personally, the Nigerian Bar Association needs to come out, it's good the role the president is playing. Everybody has his own different styles. But it's important in the circumstance of what we are going through that the Nigerian Bar Association should play a leading role in championing the rights of citizens, and especially in taking action. For instance, in this particular case, I thought that the NBA should have demanded for the prosecution, or investigation, prosecution, and indeed empanel a committee of inquiry to conduct, talk to the lawyers, talk to DSS, talk to the court officials, and name people and forward the report to the Inspector General of Police, to the Attorney General, to the Presidency, so that it will serve as a deterrence. So we should go beyond just issuing press releases, because that's the impression everybody gets, that the NBA has become like a press release organization. But of course, everybody has his own style. And I must commend the president in some areas where he has taken such action. But given the recurrence of these activities in recent times that threatens the liberty of citizens, it should go beyond press release.
Let me take off from where you stopped. Given the recurrence that we've seen, what do you think should be done by the judiciary to protect itself from such disrespect going forward?
You see, when you do these things, it has effect. Look at what happened in Abuja. The same DSS attempted, after the show that happened in Lagos, to go to another division of the same Federal High Court. You saw the reaction of the judge. So, one way or the other, judges, will follow up with such actions that seems to challenge their authority. So I think what the court should do is to resist an attempt, to encroach upon the authority and integrity of the court by ensuring that until there is compliance with the order of the Federal High Court, I don't think any division of the Federal High Court in Nigeria should entertain any charge from the DSS. Beyond that also, I thought that the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court ought to have made some kind of intervention, through some statements, to be able to reaffirm the authority of the court and to make protests to the relevant agencies, do correspondence, make a complaint to people who have authority over the DSS. Because if you don't arrest this, you don't know what will happen tomorrow. It's a bad precedent and we shouldn't allow to sleep.
Let's round up talking about issues of fuel subsidy and the palliatives, fuel subsidy removal and palliatives. Some commentators have said that the current reality in Nigeria is that we don't have a system that can make palliative work because of the lack of data and corruption on the other hand. With this in mind, what advice would you give to government to ensure that the palliatives, the much talked about palliatives, are not being wasted like we've seen in the recent past?
When you talk about palliatives, really, it's a way of the ruling class shoving it in the face of the masses that were oppressing you. So I really don't believe in palliatives, because it's like finding job for the boys. It will eventually end up in the pockets of loyalists of politicians and our leaders. My own understanding of fuel subsidy politics is that it's a corruptive, it's a system that's been corrupted and you want to remove it for the benefit of every other person. Certain things are common to all of us: transportation, electricity, education, healthcare. Because the people who are in leadership don't bear the brunt of fuel subsidy removal. Virtually all the convoys you see now buy fuel on the budget of the people of Nigeria. The president has a fleet of jets. So if you really want to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal, is to look at the general areas that affect the greater interest of people and address those areas. Do the roads, put more buses for mass transit, address the issue of electricity supply so that I don't have to have cost to be buying fuel to run my generator. That's subsidy. Ensure that electricity supply is 24 hours. Talk to the discos. You can't increase your charges now unless you have ensured that everybody is metered. Because if you increase the charges and then you are still doing estimated billing, people are suffering. Ensure that you have means of transporting goods, especially from the farm to the cities, so that, it will reduce the cost of food items. So if you really talk about cushioning the effect of fuel subsidy removal is not to dole 8,000 naira or 12,000 naira to families, honestly. It's to address the basic issues that affect the masses of our people.
Thanks for staying tuned. The Cross River State Governor, Governor Basiotu, has charged the state judiciary to continue to be fair in the dispensation of its duties.
No society can function without justice. You remain the passionate common man, the last hope. And I'm happy that in Cross River State, to some extent, we've been able to abide with the dictates of our Constitution. But I want to say that we'll begin to build a complete new relationship where we're going to build confidence in each and every arm of government. No society can thrive or prosper without investors having full confidence in the judiciary. This, to some extent, I want to believe, has affected us to some point. In the past, I believe there were some issues of welfare, but in the first meeting we held with all top government functionaries, we had said that would change. We are ready completely to support the judiciary arm to any level of support they want us to do. But we also want to plead that please, judgments against government should be tempered with mercy. We have too many garnishes, we have too many issues to grapple with. And I believe that if we are working together, we are working to deliver the state. We are working to make sure that our people benefit not just from dividends of democracy, but that of responsibility as leaders that God has put us in different positions to serve.
And ahead of the bar final examinations of the Nigerian Law School, a senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Joseph Dadu, is advocating the need for lawyers to exhibit integrity in all their dealings with their clients. The senior advocate of Nigeria, who was speaking at a ceremony to mark the end of a mandatory 6-week externship for students of the Nigerian Law School, explained that the students would also have to do exploits in the profession, must have good character and integrity as their watchword.
Making fast money, coming out of the law school and wanting to ride Jeep, wanting to ride, what's the name of this Mercedes-Benz that, G-Wagon. Maybe you will add bulletproof to it. I don't know who is your enemy at this age. Struggling to buy a private jet to fly to, I don't know where. Should not be your ambition. Your ambition really is, like what Taisho Larry said in the Daily Times, may your road be rough. That was what he wished his best friends. That if your road is not rough, you will not understand the path to greatness. If everything is smooth, you just yahoo yourself to millions. You are spending your future patrimony. You're spending what probably God has stored it for you to enjoy when you should have enjoyed it. I also want to let you know that you are coming into the profession at the time when Nigeria needs you the most. A lot of things are going wrong. Now, how can you do it? You cannot do it by repeating their mistakes. You can't do it by being smart. You can't do it by playing tricks. You can't do it by going to court and not doing the things that you need to do. You can't do it by giving bribes to judges, either in cash or in kind. You can't do it by just generally being dishonest. No. Until we get it right. Until a few people are ready to make the difference. A few people are ready to say, no, we will not engage in evil. Until a few people can say, okay, well, I fear God. and I will follow his precepts. And I also love my fellow human being. When we get those kinds of leaders in this country, then we can say we'll make progress. But it's a Herculean task.
And just before we go, let's quickly do a recap of some of the top trending stories from the courtrooms.
We begin with the report that the Federal Capital Territory High Court Abuja has struck out an application filed by the Department of State Services DSS to secure an order to detain the suspended governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, for 14 more days based on what they refer to as fresh evidence they have uncovered. Justice Hamza Muazu struck out the application for being an abuse of court process and for lack of jurisdiction. When the judge questioned counsel to the DSS, Mr. Victor Ejelonu, on the court's jurisdiction in view of the provisions of sections 293 and 296 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which vest exclusive rights on the magistrate court to grant detention order, the counsel applied and withdrew the matter. This application follows the arraignment and rearrest of Mr. Emefiele from the premises of the Federal High Court in Lagos by the DSS after he was remanded in the custody of the Correctional Center pending the perfection of his bail. Still in Abuja, Justice Inyang Ekwo of the Federal High Court has fixed October the 25th for judgment in the suit filed by Senator Adamu Bulkachuwa against the Attorney General of the Federation, the ICPC, DSS, and the Nigerian Police. Senator Bulkachuwa is accusing the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, the DSS, and others of colluding with his political enemies to harass him following his valedictory comment on the floor of the Senate, which he says his political enemies continue to misrepresent. The former lawmaker argued that as a serving senator when he made the comment, he was by law immune to arrest or detention over any of his conduct, action or speech on the floor of the Senate. Bulkachuwa stated that he was surprised to receive an invitation from the ICPC asking him to report for interview on June the 22nd for interrogation over his comment on the floor of the Senate. He argued that by law, it was only the Senate in session, the Committee of the Whole, or any of its subcommittees that had the disciplinary power to invite him to answer any question or questions relating to his conduct or utterances on the floor of the upper chamber. The same Justice Inyang Ekwo has dismissed the preliminary objection filed by the National Youth Service Corps against the Governor of Enugu State, Mr. Peter Mbah's 20 billion naira suit over alleged certificate forgery. In his ruling, Justice Ekwo held that the provisions of Section 20 of the NYSC Act does not relate to Mbah, as he is not currently a serving NYSC member, an intended one, or an employee of the Corps. At the last adjourned date, the counsel for NYSC had argued that Mr. Mbah contravened the NYSC Act and the institution of the suit. While urging the court to strike out the suit, he said Mr. Mbah did not appeal to the president as required by the provisions of Section 20 of the NYSC Act before instituting the suit against them. Mr. Mbah's counsel urged Justice Ekwo to dismiss the objection on the grounds that the sections cited in the NYSC Act were not applicable in the instant suit and that a counter-affidavit and written address had been filed in response to the preliminary objection. At the National Assembly Election Petition Tribunal sitting in Asaba, the three-man panel has declared Ndudi Elumelu of the PDP as the winner of the 2023 House of Representatives election for Aniocha Oshimili Federal Constituency. The tribunal, in its judgment, nullified the declaration of Ngozi Okolie by the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) as the winner of that election. The tribunal held that Ngozi Okolie was not duly sponsored by the Labour Party as at May 28, 2022, when the party's primary was held. Ndudi Elumelu, the former minority leader of the 9th House of Representatives, had filed his petition praying the tribunal to disqualify Okolie, who was declared winner of the election by the Independent National Electoral Commission. And we round up with a report that the Federal High Court in Kano State has set aside September the 22nd to deliver judgment on the case filed by former State Governor Abdullahi Ganduje seeking to stop the anti-graft agency from investigating him. A senior advocate of Nigeria and counsel to the Kano State Public Complaint and Anti-Corruption Commission, Femi Falana, had argued that the immunity of the former governor ended on May the 29th and that no court in the country should provide protection to him, his family and his cabinet. However, counsel to the former governor has insisted that due process was not followed, resulting in the breach of his client's fundamental human rights.
And that's the program for today. If you missed any part of it, you can find it on past episodes on our YouTube channel. Do also give us feedback via any of our social media platforms. I'm Shola Shele. Thank you for watching and see you next week.